Utah has spent 20 years and tens of millions of dollars on a 140-mile pipeline that does not exist. Not 1 foot of pipe is in the ground. The route is drawn. The width is set at 69 inches. The endpoint is Sand Hollow Reservoir outside St. George, and the water it was supposed to carry 86,249 acre-feet a year is water that Lake Powell no longer has. The project was never canceled. It was paused, and nobody will say for how long. The official cost guess runs between $1.3 and $2.2 billion in 2022 dollars. People against it put it higher. 5 pump stations would push the water out of Lake Powell, near Glen Canyon Dam in Page, Arizona, across 140 miles of open desert into the northern edge of the Mojave. Even the delivery number has 2 versions. The federal permit file lists up to 86,249 acre-feet pulled out at the reservoir. The project's own website lists 83,756 acre-feet arriving at the far end. The gap between those 2 numbers is the water the pipe would use up getting there. At the far end sits Washington County, Utah, roughly 209,000 people, 4 times bigger than it was in 1990. St. George, its largest city, has ranked as the fastest-growing metro area in the United States in recent years. And nearly every drop those people drink comes from one small river, the Virgin, which is already fully spoken for. On June 30th, 2026, Lake Powell sat at 3,525.17 feet above sea level. That is 174 feet below full. It held 5.6 million acre-feet, roughly 24% of what it can hold. The height where the turbines inside Glen Canyon Dam stop making power is 3,490 feet. Do the subtraction. The reservoir that this pipeline was designed to drink from is sitting about 35 feet above the point where the dam attached to it stops making electricity. The law that approved the pipeline was signed in 2006. That was 1 year before the federal government set its first real shortage rules for the Colorado River. In 2006, those rules were paperwork. 2 decades later, they are the reason a 140-mile pipe is still a drawing. In 2006, the Utah legislature passed the Lake Powell Pipeline Development Act. The state would build it. The Washington County Water Conservancy District would pay the state back through impact fees, water rates, and property taxes. 10 southern Utah towns were named as the ones who would get the water. Look closely at that payback plan, because it is the quiet part. A pipeline priced between $1.3 and $2.2 billion would be paid back by roughly 209,000 people. The state does not pay it back. One county does, through the fees on new homes, the rates on existing ones, and property taxes on every lot inside the district. The Utah Rivers Council has argued for years that the debt would land on people who mostly need the water for watering yards, and that the number of people served would be closer to 160,000 than to any statewide number. The district disputes that framing. Both sides agree on the math. A small tax base was signed up to carry a very large number. The logic was clean at the time. Utah is an upper basin state under the 1922 Colorado River Compact and the 1948 Upper Colorado River Basin Compact. Under those deals, Utah is owed a share of the river it has never fully used. The pipeline was the tool to go get it. For a while, it moved. In 2008, the Utah Board of Water Resources filed a preliminary application document and a notice of intent with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The project was headed for a power license because the original design included power stations at the Hurricane Cliffs that would make electricity on the way down. In January 2009, the commission ordered 23 separate studies: fish, cultural sites, soil, recreation, air quality, endangered species. Every one had to be written and revised. Those revisions ran from 2010 to 2016, when the final versions went to the commission. Then, the data inside them was updated again in filings made in 2018 and 2019. On June 22, 2018, the Bureau of Land Management published its own notice in the Federal Register. Engineering firms were hired. Millions of dollars in planning costs went out the door. Then, in September 2019, Utah changed the design. The Board of Water Resources cut the 2 reservoirs at the Hurricane Cliffs that were meant to make power at peak demand. On September 25, 2019, it pulled the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission application entirely. The case was closed on October 10th. Read that decision carefully, because it matters more than it looks. The original design had 6 water power plants on the downhill leg, and the power they made was supposed to cover part of the cost of running the pumps. Reclamation's own project summary states plainly that the project's backers removed the power-making parts in 2019. From that point forward, the pumps had no offset. The pipeline stopped being a project that paid part of its own energy bill. Eric Millis, then director of the Utah Division of Water Resources, said the division looked forward to updating the timeline and the cost guess. On October 28, 2019, the Department of the Interior put the Bureau of Reclamation in charge of the environmental review. In June 2020, Reclamation released the draft environmental impact statement. That was the closest the Lake Powell pipeline ever came to existing. Meanwhile, the river was giving smaller answers every year. Flows in the Colorado have dropped by roughly 20% since the turn of the century. Lake Powell, which was nearly full in 1980, began a long slide. By August 2022, it stood at about 26% of what it can hold, the lowest since 1967. In April 2023, the surface hit 3,520 feet, a record low for the reservoir. The pipeline was still on paper the entire time. The public comment window on that draft closed on September 8, 2020. Reclamation described the response as thousands of comments. The project's opponents counted more than 14,000. Either way, that is not a normal volume for a regional water pipeline. Then the other states moved. Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, Nevada, California, and Arizona signed a joint letter to Interior Secretary David Bernhardt warning that the project raised serious legal and operating problems and signaling they were ready to sue. 6 states, 1 target. That had never happened before to a single Colorado River project. And the states were not the only obstacle. The route crosses federal ground and tribal ground. The Bureau of Land Management would have to change its Arizona Strip land plan and grant a right-of-way. The National Park Service would have to issue a separate permit. The Bureau of Indian Affairs was working with the Kaibab Band of Paiute Indians as a partner agency. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service still owed its wildlife review. Each of those is a decision point, and each one can be fought in court. On September 24, 2020, the Utah Division of Water Resources and the Washington County Water Conservancy District asked Reclamation for more time. Todd Adams, director of the Utah Division of Water Resources, called the pipeline a critical water project for Utah and said the extension would allow more study. That request was 6 years ago. The federal review has not restarted. Kane County, which had been a partner on the project, formally pulled out. The water right application filed with the Utah State Engineer sat undecided. And the pipeline slid into a category that does not have a good name. Not approved, not denied, not built, not over. Now, pull back and look at the ground this thing was supposed to cross. St. George sits at about 2,800 feet of height in Utah's southwest corner, in the top edge of the Mojave Desert. Rainfall averages around 8 inches a year. The Virgin River, a branch of the Colorado, drains the high country near Zion and runs past town on its way to Lake Mead. That river is the whole supply. It fills Sand Hollow Reservoir and Quail Creek Reservoir. It supports the fields and every subdivision built in the last 30 years. Regional water managers describe it as basically used up, meaning there is no real unclaimed water left in it. Sand Hollow Reservoir sits at about 3,000 feet. Lake Powell's surface is currently above that, so the route is not a simple uphill haul or a simple downhill run. The route climbs first. Water gets pumped out of Lake Powell and lifted to a high point east of Kanab, roughly 2,000 feet of gain. From there, the remaining 89 miles fall towards Sand Hollow. The climb is the expensive half, and it never stops needing electricity, because gravity does not run pumps. Put the delivery number in units a person can hold. 1 acre-foot is about 326,000 gallons, roughly enough to run 2 average American homes for a year. So 86,249 acre-feet is somewhere near 28 billion gallons a year. The mechanism underneath all of this rarely gets explained. The water Utah wanted to move through that pipe is real on paper and shaky in the channel. The 1922 compact split the river based on flow readings taken during one of the wettest stretches in the basin's recorded history. The states wrote down more water than the river reliably carries. Every share since has been a slice of a number that was too big when it was written and has been shrinking ever since. Think of an airline that sold more tickets than the plane has seats. Everyone holding a ticket is holding a real ticket. There are just more of them than there are places to sit. For decades, that did not matter because the upper basin states never showed up to claim all their seats. The Lake Powell pipeline was Utah walking to the gate. The other 6 states looked at that and did the same math. If Utah takes another 86,249 acre-feet out of a reservoir sitting at 24%, someone downstream gets less. Zachary Frankel, executive director of the nonprofit Utah Rivers Council, told the Salt Lake Tribune, "The project simply does not make sense," pointing out that the lower basin was giving up millions of acre-feet while Utah pushed the largest new take from the river anywhere in the basin. That is the legal fight. The physical fight is worse. The pipeline's draft design put its intake at a height picked when the reservoir behaved differently. Critics have pointed out the obvious problem with that. If Lake Powell keeps falling, an intake set at a fixed height can end up above the water it was built to take. A pipe that starts in dry rock moves nothing at all. No new intake height has been published because the review that would produce one has not restarted. The water flowing into Lake Powell in water year 2026 is forecast at 3.5 million acre-feet. That is 36% of average. The April through July window, the melt season that does most of the work, came in at 1,080,000 acre-feet, about 17% of normal. The water held across the whole Colorado River system stands near 33% of capacity, down from 40% 1 year earlier. And the snow that feeds all of it is not showing up. About 95% of Utah's water supply arrives as snowpack. The National Weather Service recorded 2025 as the warmest year in Utah's history. In January 2026, the Utah Division of Water Resources described the state's snow season as poor and warned that reservoirs were less likely to refill if the pattern held. It held. If you are finding this useful, subscribe. We cover Western water systems every week with the full picture you need to actually follow what is going on. While the pipeline was frozen, Washington County started building something else. The district's answer is a regional reuse system, and the scale of it tells you how serious the situation is. Estimated cost, up to $1 billion. It captures treated wastewater that currently flows down the Virgin River toward Lake Mead, cleans it further, and sends it back into the county's supply. The pieces are going in now. Chief Toker Reservoir is under construction. The Confluence Park cleaning plant is nearly complete. Dry Wash and Graveyard reservoirs are expected to add about 1,450 acre-feet a year between 2026 and 2029. By 2030, with big supply lines and an advanced treatment plant online, the system is expected to produce up to 15,888 acre-feet a year. Hold that last number against the pipeline number. 15,888 against 86,249. At full build-out, the backup plan delivers less than a quarter of what the pipeline promised. The district puts its cost at up to $1 billion against a pipeline that was never priced below $1.3 billion. There is a second difference that nobody put on a slide. The pipeline was new water, brought in from outside the basin the county lives in. The reuse system is the same water, run through the county a second time. It stretches the supply. It does not add to it, which means every new resident arriving in Washington County is being served by splitting a fixed river more finely, not by finding a bigger one. Zach Renstrom, general manager of the Washington County Water Conservancy District, has been direct about why the county changed course. He has said on the record that there are a lot of advantages to the Lake Powell pipeline, but that with the current politics and the Colorado River talks underway, the district has had to shift to a different plan. He has also said the Lake Powell connection is not gone, only on hold. That is the sentence the entire story turns on. Not gone, on hold. Conservation is carrying the rest of the load. Washington County has pulled out more than 1 million square feet of lawn through its lawn replacement program, which the district figures saves about 45 million gallons a year. New golf courses are blocked unless builders bring their own water that is not for drinking. Outdoor watering rules have tightened. In May 2026, Renstrom told the Colorado River Authority of Utah that even with the population climbing, the county's overall water demand has flattened out. That is a real win. It is also not enough on its own, and the district knows it. In January 2026, at a public meeting in Hurricane, Ben Wolf, a deputy area manager with the Bureau of Reclamation, put a chart on the screen showing expected demand climbing steeply while supply stayed nearly flat. He told the room, "This is the slide that should keep you awake at night. So follow what happens if the pipe never gets built. The effects do not arrive all at once. They arrive in order. First, the water district. Every acre-foot the pipeline was supposed to deliver has to be found somewhere else, at a cost that lands on impact fees, water rates, and property taxes inside one county of roughly 209,000 people. Second, the city of St. George. Growth in southwest Utah has been priced, approved, and paid for on the belief that more water was coming. Take that belief away, and the math behind new subdivisions, new business strips, and new city bonds changes. Third, the growth curve itself. The Chem C. Gardner Policy Institute at the University of Utah revised its forecast in late 2025 and now expects Washington County to reach 384,339 residents. By 2065, a gain of 175,255 people, or 84%. That is a large drop from its 2022 forecast, which had the county adding 282,417 people by 2060. The district uses those forecasts for supply planning, and Renstrom has said slower growth could push some construction out by 5 or 10 years. Fourth, the rest of the Upper Basin. Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico all hold unused paper shares. If Utah's pipeline is shelved for good by federal and interstate pressure rather than by a court, that outcome becomes the unofficial example for every future Upper Basin project. Fifth, the negotiating table. The Colorado River's 2007 interim guidelines run out at the end of 2026. The 7 basin states missed a November 11th, 2025 deadline for a framework, then missed a February 14th, 2026 deadline for a final shared agreement. The Department of the Interior has said it is moving ahead to finish post-2026 operating rules by October 1st, 2026, with or without a 7-state deal. Utah still holds the pipeline plan, never pulled back, while that document gets written. There is a version of this story that already ended, and it happened one state over. On May 21st, 2020, the board of the Southern Nevada Water Authority voted to give up the last of its water rights applications for a 300-mile pipeline meant to pump groundwater from rural eastern Nevada to Las Vegas. The vote was unanimous. That project had been alive since 1989. 31 years of lawsuits, hearings, ranchers, tribes, and political fighting. About $330 million was written off. General Manager John Ensminger had told the board the project should move into indefinite deferred status. Then the board went further and dropped the applications, which is the step Utah has never taken. Southern Nevada replaced the pipeline with plumbing it already had. Return flow credits, which count the treated water it sends back to Lake Mead, stretch the state's Colorado River supply by nearly 70%. In 2021, the Nevada legislature passed Assembly Bill 356, ordering decorative grass torn out across the Las Vegas Valley by the end of 2026. The pipeline it defended for 31 years is a filing cabinet. Washington County is standing at the same fork, holding a plan it has not let go of and building the alternative anyway. So which sentence is the real one? Is the Lake Powell pipeline on hold? Or is on hold the polite word for over? If the post-2026 rules lock in smaller releases from Glen Canyon Dam, what exactly would the pipeline pull? How does a state defend a paper water right at a reservoir sitting 174 feet below full? And if the reuse system covers less than a quarter of the original promise, where does the rest come from for a county that expects to add 175,255 people? Nobody can answer those yet. The federal review is not scheduled to restart. The water right application has never been ruled on. The 7 states have not signed anything. Sand Hollow Reservoir still sits east of St. George near Hurricane, filled by the Virgin River, exactly as it was before any of this began. Along its eastern edge, there is a stretch of open desert where the pipe was supposed to arrive. There are no survey markers out there. The route is still on file in Salt Lake City, and the ground has never been broken.